The cold wind pushed against the glass windows of Joe's diner as Sarah Martinez pulled open the heavy door. A small bell rang above her head, announcing her arrival to the few people scattered around the restaurant. It was almost 7 in the evening, and the November darkness had already settled over the small town like a thick blanket. Sarah walked slowly to an empty booth in the corner, away from the other customers. Her feet hurt from standing all day at the grocery store. Her back ached from lifting boxes and restocking shelves for 8 straight hours. She had only 30 minutes before her next shift started at the gas station down the road. She needed to eat something, anything, to give her body the energy to make it through another 6 hours of work. She slid into the worn vinyl seat and picked up the plastic menu that was sticky from years of use. Her tired eyes scanned the prices. Everything seemed too expensive. A burger was $12. The chicken dinner was $15. Even the soup was $8. Sarah felt her stomach tighten with worry. She had exactly $23 in her wallet, and she still needed to buy milk for Emma tomorrow morning. Emma. The thought of her 6-year-old daughter made Sarah's chest feel heavy. Right now, Emma was at Mrs. Peterson's apartment down the hall. The old woman watched Emma whenever Sarah had to work her double shifts. Mrs. Peterson was kind and never asked for much money, but Sarah still felt guilty. Emma should be having dinner with her mother, not with a neighbor. Emma should be getting tucked into bed by her own mom, not falling asleep on someone else's couch. Sarah pulled out her phone and looked at her screensaver. It was a photo of Emma from last summer, smiling big with her 2 front teeth missing. Her dark hair was in pigtails, and she wore the yellow dress they had found at the thrift store. Sarah had taken the picture at the park on Emma's birthday. They had shared a small cupcake and played on the swings until the sun went down. It was one of the few perfect days they'd had this year. A waitress walked over to Sarah's booth. Her name tag said Betty, and she looked to be in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a ponytail. She had kind eyes and a tired smile that Sarah recognized. It was the smile of someone who worked too many hours for too little money. "What can I get you, honey?" Betty asked, pulling out her order pad. Sarah looked at the menu one more time. "Just the meatloaf plate, please. The small one." Betty wrote it down and nodded. "Something to drink?" "Just water, thank you." Betty smiled and walked away toward the kitchen. Sarah leaned her head back against the booth and closed her eyes for just a moment. She tried to remember the last time she had felt truly rested. Was it before David left? Before the factory closed down and he lost his job? Before he decided that being a husband and father was too hard and disappeared one Tuesday morning while she was at work? That was 14 months ago. 14 months of Sarah working 2 jobs. Sometimes 3 when she could find weekend work cleaning houses. 14 months of never having enough money, no matter how hard she tried. 14 months of watching Emma grow up too fast, becoming too quiet, too understanding for a 6-year-old child. The bell above the door rang again, louder this time. Sarah opened her eyes and turned to look. 5 men walked into the diner and the entire restaurant seemed to change. They were all wearing black leather jackets with patches and symbols on the back. They had long beards and tattoos covering their arms. Their heavy boots made loud sounds on the floor as they walked. The other customers in the diner stopped eating. Some people stared openly at the bikers. Others looked down at their plates quickly, pretending not to notice. An elderly couple near the window whispered to each other nervously. A man in a business suit grabbed his briefcase a little tighter. The bikers took the large booth right next to Sarah. The seats creaked under their weight as they settled in. They were talking and laughing with each other, their voices deep and rough. One of them, the tallest with a thick beard and scars on his hands, sat directly behind Sarah in the back-to-back booth. She could hear every word they said. "Man, I'm starving," one of them said. "I could eat a whole cow." "You always say that, Tommy," another laughed. "And then you order a salad." They all laughed at this, the sound filling the quiet diner. Sarah noticed that Betty walked over to their table quickly, her smile a little nervous now. The bikers were polite as they ordered, calling her ma'am and saying please and thank you. But the other customers still watched them with worried eyes. Sarah tried not to listen to their conversation. She looked at her phone again, thinking about Emma. She should call and say goodnight before her shift at the gas station. Emma always waited for her goodnight call. It was their little routine, the one thing that made the long days apart a little easier. Betty returned with Sarah's plate of meatloaf. It came with mashed potatoes and green beans, and it smelled better than anything Sarah had eaten all week. Her stomach growled loudly. "Here you go, honey," Betty said, setting the plate down gently. "Can I get you anything else?" "No, thank you. This is perfect." Sarah picked up her fork and started to eat slowly. She had learned to make food last, to eat small bites and chew carefully. It made the meal stretch longer, made it feel like more. She cut the meatloaf into tiny pieces and ate them one at a time. Behind her, the bikers got their food too. She could hear them eating and talking about a trip they had taken last weekend. Something about riding through the mountains and camping under the stars. It sounded like freedom to Sarah. It sounded like a life where you could just go anywhere you wanted. Without worrying about shifts and bills and babysitters, Sarah ate about half of her meatloaf and some of the potatoes. Her stomach felt full, but she knew it was partly just anxiety. She always felt this way when she had to spend money on herself. Every dollar she spent on food for herself was a dollar she couldn't spend on Emma. She looked at the remaining food on her plate. It was still a decent amount. More than half the portion was left. If she took it home, Emma could have it for lunch tomorrow. She could heat it up in Mrs. Peterson's microwave before school. Emma loved meatloaf. She always said it was her favorite, even though Sarah knew she probably said that about everything to make her mother feel better. Sarah caught Betty's eye and waved her over quietly. The waitress came over with a smile. "How was everything?" Betty asked. "It was really good, thank you," Sarah said softly. She hesitated for a moment, then continued. "Could I get a to-go box, please? I'd like to take the leftovers for my daughter." Her voice was quiet, almost embarrassed. She didn't know why asking for a to-go box made her feel ashamed, but it did. Maybe it was because she was admitting that she couldn't finish her own meal because she was saving it for her child. Maybe it was because everyone could see how carefully she had to plan every single thing in her life. Betty's expression softened. "Of course, honey. Let me get you a good container. I'll be right back." As Betty walked away, Sarah didn't notice that the tall biker in the booth behind her had stopped eating. She didn't see him lean back slightly, listening. She didn't know that her quiet words had reached his ears and touched something deep in his chest. Sarah pulled out her worn wallet and counted her money again. $23. The meal was $9 with tax. That would leave her with $14 until Friday, when she got paid from the grocery store. She had to make it work. She always made it work. The diner felt warm compared to the cold outside, but Sarah still felt a chill run through her body. She was so tired. Tired of counting pennies. Tired of working all the time. Tired of missing her daughter. Tired of being tired, but she couldn't stop. She had Emma depending on her. That little girl with the missing teeth and the yellow dress from the thrift store. That was all that mattered. As long as Emma had food and a safe place to sleep, Sarah could keep going. She had to keep going. Betty returned with a foam container and a plastic bag. Sarah carefully transferred the remaining food into the box, making sure not to waste a single bite. She closed the lid and placed it in the bag. Tomorrow, Emma would have a good lunch. That thought made everything worth it. Sarah reached for her wallet again, ready to pay her bill and leave for her next shift. She had no idea that in the next few minutes everything was about to change. Sarah placed the foam container carefully into the plastic bag and set it on the seat beside her. She opened her wallet and counted out $9.50, making sure she had the exact amount with tax. Her hands moved slowly, deliberately, as she arranged the bills and coins neatly on the table. Betty walked by carrying plates for the biker's table. The smell of burgers and fries filled the air. Sarah's stomach reminded her that she was still hungry, but she pushed the feeling away. Emma needed this food more than she did. Besides, there were crackers in the break room at the gas station. She could eat those during her shift if she got too hungry. At the booth behind her, the bikers were deep in conversation. Their voices were loud but not angry. They talked about motorcycles and trips and people Sarah didn't know. One of them was telling a story about something funny that happened last week. The others were laughing, their joy filling the small diner. Sarah glanced around the restaurant. The elderly couple by the window had finished their meal and were getting ready to leave. The man in the business suit was typing on his laptop while picking at a sandwich. A young family with 2 small children sat in a booth near the door. The children were coloring on paper placemats while their parents looked tired and happy at the same time. For a moment, Sarah felt incredibly alone. All around her were people with lives that seemed so much easier than hers. The elderly couple had each other. The man in the suit had his important job. The young family had 2 parents to share the work. Sarah had only herself and a 6-year-old daughter who deserved so much more than what they had. She shook her head slightly, pushing away the sad thoughts. Feeling sorry for herself wouldn't change anything. She needed to focus. Pay the bill, get to the gas station, work her shift, go home to Emma. One step at a time. That was how she survived each day. Betty appeared at her table with the check. She placed it face down on the table and gave Sarah another one of her kind smiles. You take care now, honey. Drive safe out there. Thank you, Sarah said quietly. She picked up the check and looked at the total. $9.35. She had counted correctly. She placed her money on top of the check, including a small tip of $1. She knew Betty probably needed it as much as she did. Just as Sarah reached for the plastic bag with Emma's food, a shadow fell across her table. She looked up startled. The tall biker from the next booth was standing beside her table. He was even bigger standing up than she had thought. His leather jacket was covered in patches, and his arms showed tattoos that went all the way up to his neck. His beard was thick and gray in places. His hands looked rough and scarred, like they had seen hard work and harder times. Sarah felt her heart beat faster. The other customers in the diner turned to look. The restaurant became very quiet. Even the bikers at the next table stopped talking and watched. The man looked down at Sarah, and for a moment she couldn't read his expression. Was he angry? She tried to think if she had done something wrong. Had she said something that bothered him? She gripped the edge of the table, ready to grab her things and leave if she needed to. But then the man spoke, and his voice was much gentler than Sarah expected. Excuse me, ma'am, he said. His words were polite, careful. I couldn't help but overhear what you said to the waitress. Sarah's face grew hot with embarrassment. Her cheeks turned red. He had heard her ask for the to-go box. He had heard her say it was for her daughter. Everyone in the diner was watching now. She wanted to disappear. I'm sorry if I was too loud. Sarah stammered, her voice shaking slightly. She didn't know what else to say. The biker shook his head. No, ma'am. You weren't loud at all. He paused, and Sarah saw something change in his eyes. They looked sad somehow, but also determined. I heard you say you were taking your leftovers home for your daughter. Sarah nodded slowly, confused about where this was going. Her hand moved protectively to the plastic bag beside her. Yes, sir. She's at home with a neighbor. I have to go to work soon, but she'll have this for lunch tomorrow. The man was quiet for a moment, and then he turned toward where Betty was standing near the kitchen. Betty, he called out, his deep voice carrying easily across the quiet diner. Could you come here for a minute? Betty walked over quickly, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked between the biker and Sarah with concern on her face. Is everything okay, Marcus? So his name was Marcus, Sarah thought. At least now she knew what to call him if she needed to. Marcus nodded. Everything's fine. Actually, more than fine. He turned back to look at Sarah and then back to Betty. Betty, I need you to make a full order of the chicken dinner. The big one with all the sides. Mashed potatoes, vegetables, rolls, everything. Make it to go. Betty pulled out her order pad, writing quickly. Okay, the full chicken dinner to go. Anything else? Yeah, Marcus continued. His voice was firm but kind. Add a slice of that chocolate cake you make. The big slice. Sarah's eyes went wide. She started to shake her head. Wait, I don't understand. I didn't order. Marcus held up his hand gently, asking her to wait. I know you didn't order it, ma'am. I'm ordering it. For your daughter. The diner was completely silent now. Sarah could hear the clock on the wall ticking. She could hear the hum of the refrigerator behind the counter. She could hear her own heart pounding in her chest. I can't accept that, Sarah said quickly, her voice filled with emotion. That's very kind, but I can't let you pay for food for us. I don't even know you. Marcus's expression softened even more. He pulled out a chair from a nearby table and sat down so he wasn't towering over Sarah anymore. Now they were at eye level. His movements were slow and careful, like he didn't want to scare her. Ma'am, I don't know your story, Marcus said quietly. But I know what it looks like when a parent is doing everything they can for their child. I heard you order the cheapest thing on the menu. I saw you eat only half of it. I heard you asked to take the rest home for your little girl. Tears started to form in Sarah's eyes. She tried to blink them away, but they wouldn't stop. I'm managing, she whispered. We're okay. I'm sure you are, Marcus said gently. I'm sure you work hard and do your best. But here's the thing. Your daughter deserves a hot meal, not leftovers from her mama's dinner. And you deserve to eat a full meal without having to choose between your hunger and your child's." A tear rolled down Sarah's cheek. She quickly wiped it away with the back of her hand. "I don't know what to say." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. It was old and worn, made of leather that had seen many years. He opened it and pulled out a $100 bill. He handed it to Betty, who was standing there with tears in her own eyes now. "Betty, use this for her meal," Marcus said, "and whatever else she needs. If there's any left over, keep it as a tip. You work hard too." Betty took the money with shaking hands. "Marcus, this is too much." "It's exactly enough," Marcus said firmly. He stood up from the chair and looked down at Sarah again. "Ma'am, I don't want to embarrass you. I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I just want to help because I can and because someone should." Sarah couldn't speak. The tears were flowing freely now, and she didn't try to stop them. She looked up at this stranger, this man who everyone in the diner had been nervous about just minutes ago, and she saw nothing but kindness in his eyes. "Why?" she finally managed to ask. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. His jaw tightened, and Sarah saw old pain flash across his face. "Because a long time ago I had a daughter too, and I remember what it was like to struggle. I remember what it was like to want to give her everything and not be able to." He said had not have, Sarah noticed. Past tense. Her heart broke a little bit more. "I'm so sorry," Sarah whispered. Marcus nodded slowly. "Me too, but we can't change the past. We can only help in the present." He looked at Betty. "Make that dinner special, okay? Add whatever you think a little girl would like." Betty nodded, wiping her own tears with her apron. "I'll make it perfect, Marcus. I promise." Marcus started to turn back to his booth, but Sarah reached out and touched his arm gently. He stopped and looked at her. "Thank you," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "Thank you so much. You have no idea what this means to us." Marcus's tough expression cracked just a little, and Sarah saw the grief and goodness that lived inside this man. "What's your daughter's name?" he asked. "Emma. Her name is Emma. She's 6 years old." Marcus smiled, a real smile that made his whole face change. "Emma's a beautiful name. You tell Emma that dinner tonight is from a friend. Tell her there are people in the world who care about her and her mama." Sarah nodded, unable to speak anymore. Marcus returned to his booth, and slowly the diner came back to life. But everything had changed. The air felt different. The light seemed warmer. And Sarah Martinez, who had walked in exhausted and hopeless just 30 minutes ago, now sat in her corner booth with tears of gratitude streaming down her face. She looked at the money still sitting on her table, the $9.50 she had counted out so carefully. She didn't need it now. She could use it for milk and bread, maybe even a small toy for Emma. Betty came over and squeezed Sarah's shoulder gently before heading to the kitchen to prepare Emma's meal. Marcus walked back to his booth, and his friends looked at him with knowing expressions. They had watched the whole thing, and not one of them said a word against it. Instead, one of them, a shorter man with a gray ponytail, nodded at Marcus with respect in his eyes. "That was a good thing you did, brother," the man said quietly. Marcus sat down heavily and picked up his coffee cup. His hands were steady, but Sarah could see from her booth that his eyes looked far away, like he was remembering something from long ago. Sarah sat very still, trying to process what had just happened. Her heart was still racing. Her hands were still shaking. The money Marcus had given Betty could have paid for a week's worth of groceries, maybe more, and he had just given it away to a complete stranger without asking for anything in return. She looked down at her phone and saw the time. She needed to leave for the gas station in 15 minutes, but she couldn't leave without the food for Emma. She would wait, even if it meant being a few minutes late. Her boss would understand. He had to understand. The elderly couple near the window had been watching everything. Now the old man stood up slowly, using his cane for support. His wife held his arm as they walked toward Marcus's booth. The bikers looked up, and for a moment Sarah saw them tense up slightly, as if expecting trouble. But the old man's face was soft and grateful. "Excuse me, young man," he said to Marcus. His voice was thin but strong. "My wife and I, we saw what you did for that young lady. That was a real act of kindness." Marcus looked uncomfortable with the attention. "Just doing what's right, sir." The old man nodded. "Not everyone does what's right anymore." "You're a good man." He turned to Betty, who was standing nearby. Betty, add $20 to our bill. Give it to that young mother. Tell her it's from an old couple who remembers what it's like to struggle. His wife squeezed his arm and smiled. We raised 4 children during hard times. We know how it feels. Betty's eyes filled with tears again. I'll make sure she gets it. Sarah heard all of this from her booth. She put her face in her hands and started crying again. She couldn't believe this was happening. First Marcus, now this elderly couple. It felt like a dream. Like she would wake up any moment back in her tiny apartment with bills she couldn't pay and a refrigerator that was almost empty. The man in the business suit closed his laptop and stood up. He walked to the counter and pulled out his wallet. Sarah couldn't hear what he said to Betty, but she saw him hand over several bills before nodding toward Sarah's booth. Betty looked surprised and grateful. At the family booth near the door, the mother whispered something to her husband. He smiled and nodded. They called Betty over and had a quiet conversation with her. Sarah saw the mother's eyes drift toward her with understanding and compassion. One by one, without any announcement or fanfare, the people in the diner began to show their own kindness. Some gave money. Some offered words of encouragement that Betty promised to pass along. The young family arranged for a gift card to be added to Sarah's bag of food. Marcus watched all of this from his booth, and Sarah saw something change in his expression. His eyes grew brighter, almost watery. One of his biker friends leaned over and said something that made Marcus smile, a sad, beautiful smile. Sarah felt overwhelmed. She had come into this diner feeling invisible, feeling like she was fighting her battles all alone in a world that didn't care, but now she saw that she had been wrong. There were good people everywhere. There was kindness hiding in unexpected places. Betty came over to Sarah's table carrying a large bag. The smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread filled the air. Honey, your order is ready. And it's not just the chicken dinner. Betty set the bag down and started pulling out containers. There's the full chicken dinner with all the sides. There's the chocolate cake. There's also a container of vegetable soup that Marcus added. And the family over there sent a gift card for $50 to use here whenever you need a meal. Sarah stared at all the food. There was enough for several meals, not just one. Emma would be so excited. She might even be able to share some with Mrs. Peterson, who had been so kind to watch her all these months. And this, Betty continued, placing several bills on the table. This is from the other customers. The elderly couple gave $20. The man in the suit gave $50. The young family gave $10. Everyone wanted to help. Sarah looked at the money. It was more than she would make in a whole shift at the gas station. She couldn't speak. She couldn't even breathe properly. Her chest felt tight with emotion. Betty sat down in the booth across from Sarah and reached across to hold her hand. Sweetie, I know you're probably feeling embarrassed or overwhelmed, but let me tell you something. Sometimes we all need help. There's no shame in that. These people wanted to help you because they saw someone who's trying so hard. They saw a good mama who's doing everything she can for her child. I don't deserve this, Sarah whispered through her tears. I'm nobody special. I'm just trying to survive. That's exactly why you deserve it, Betty said firmly. Because you're trying. Because you haven't given up. Because you're still fighting. She squeezed Sarah's hand. Take this blessing, honey. Use it to make things a little easier for you and your little girl. And someday when you're on your feet and doing better, you pass it on to someone else who needs it. Sarah nodded, unable to find words. She looked over at Marcus's booth. He was eating his burger now, talking with his friends like nothing unusual had happened. But Sarah knew better. Something very unusual had happened. Something miraculous. She gathered her courage and stood up from her booth. She picked up the bag of food and walked slowly toward Marcus's table. The bikers stopped talking and looked at her. Up close, they seemed less scary and more like regular people who just happened to ride motorcycles. Marcus? Sarah said softly. He looked up at her and put down his burger. Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to say thank you again, and to tell you. She paused, trying to find the right words. To tell you that your daughter must have been very lucky to have a father like you, and I'm so sorry for whatever happened. Marcus's eyes grew red around the edges, but he didn't cry. He nodded slowly. Thank you. Her name was Lily. She would have been 23 this year. Lily is a beautiful name, Sarah said, echoing what Marcus had said about Emma earlier. She was beautiful, Marcus said quietly, inside and out. Just like I'm sure your Emma is. One of the other bikers, the one with the ponytail, spoke up. Marcus lost his daughter in a car accident 12 years ago. Drunk driver. Since then, he's dedicated his life to helping families who are struggling, especially single moms. It's his way of honoring Lily's memory. Sarah felt her heart break for this man. He had experienced the worst loss a parent could face, and instead of becoming bitter or angry, he had chosen to spread kindness. He had turned his pain into purpose. Your Lily would be so proud of you, Sarah said. I can tell she raised a good man. Marcus smiled at this, his expression surprised. Actually, she raised me. I wasn't always a good person. I made a lot of mistakes. But being her father made me want to be better. She made me better. Another biker, this one with a shaved head and a thick red beard, added, We're all part of a group called the Road Knights. We're veterans mostly. We ride together, but we also work together to help people in need. Marcus started the whole thing after Lily passed. Sarah looked at each of them with new understanding. These weren't dangerous men. These were heroes wearing leather jackets. These were people who had seen darkness and chose to create light. Is there any way I can repay you? Sarah asked. I don't have much, but I could. Marcus held up his hand, gently stopping her. Ma'am, the only payment I want is for you to hug your daughter tonight and tell her she's loved. That's all. No money, no favors, nothing else. And maybe someday, the man with the ponytail added with a kind smile, when you're doing better, you help someone else who's struggling. That's how we change the world. One act of kindness at a time. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face again. I promise. I promise I'll pay it forward. She looked at each of the bikers, wanting to remember their faces. These men who the other customers had been afraid of. These men who had turned out to be angels in disguise. Thank you, she said one more time. All of you. You've given me more than just food and money. You've given me hope. Marcus stood up and did something Sarah didn't expect. He opened his arms and gave her a gentle, fatherly hug. It lasted only a few seconds, but in that brief moment, Sarah felt protected and valued in a way she hadn't felt since her own father had passed away years ago. You're stronger than you think, Marcus whispered. Keep fighting for your little girl. She needs her mama. Sarah stepped back and nodded. She wiped her tears and took a deep breath. She needed to get to work. But everything felt different now. The weight on her shoulders felt a little lighter. The darkness that had surrounded her life felt a little brighter. She walked back to her booth and gathered her things. She picked up the bag of food and the money, putting them safely in her purse. She looked around the diner one more time, at all these people who had shown her kindness. She wanted to remember this moment forever. As she walked toward the door, she heard Marcus call out behind her. Hey, Sarah? Sarah drove to the gas station with tears still on her cheeks. She kept glancing at the passenger seat where the bag of food sat, smelling like heaven. She couldn't wait to get home after her shift and see Emma's face when she showed her all the wonderful food they had. The gas station was mostly empty when she arrived. Her boss, Mr. Chen, was an older man from China who had owned the station for 30 years. He looked at Sarah's red eyes and tear-stained face with concern. You okay, Sarah? He asked in his thick accent. Something happen? Sarah smiled through her tears and told him the whole story. She told him about Marcus and the chicken dinner and all the people at the diner who had helped her. Mr. Chen listened quietly, nodding as she spoke. When she finished, Mr. Chen's eyes were watery too. That is beautiful story, he said. That man, Marcus, he is good person. You are good person too. Good things happen to good people sometimes. Sarah's shift at the gas station went by faster than usual. She felt different, lighter somehow. Every time a customer came in, she smiled at them genuinely. She asked how their night was going. She laughed at their jokes. One older woman commented that Sarah seemed happy tonight, and Sarah told her she had just experienced a miracle. Around 9 o'clock, a familiar truck pulled up to the pumps. Sarah looked out the window and saw the man in the business suit from the diner. He came inside to pay for his gas, and when he saw Sarah behind the counter, his face lit up with recognition. You're the woman from Joe's diner, he said. Sarah nodded.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for your generosity. You didn't have to do that. The man shook his head. I wanted to. Actually, seeing what happened tonight made me think about a lot of things. He paid for his gas and then pulled out his business card. I own a medical supply company here in town. We're always looking for good people to work in our office. If you're interested in something with better hours and better pay, give me a call. I can't promise anything, but I'd be happy to talk to you about opportunities. Sarah took the card with shaking hands. James Morrison, it read. President, Morrison Medical Supply. There was a phone number and an email address. I don't have much office experience, Sarah said hesitantly. We can train the right person, Mr. Morrison said. And from what I saw tonight, you're someone who works hard and cares about doing the right thing. That's more important than experience. After he left, Sarah stared at the card for a long time. Could this be real? Could one night change her entire life? She tucked the card carefully into her wallet, next to the photo of Emma. The hours passed, and finally her shift ended at 1 in the morning. Sarah drove home through the quiet streets, exhausted but hopeful. She parked her old car in front of the apartment building and carefully carried the bag of food upstairs. Mrs. Peterson's door opened before Sarah even reached it. The old woman must have been listening for her footsteps. Sarah, dear, come in quickly, Mrs. Peterson said. Emma is asleep on my couch, but I can wake her. No, let her sleep, Sarah said. I'll carry her home. But Mrs. Peterson, I have to tell you about what happened tonight. Sarah set the food down and told Mrs. Peterson everything. The old woman listened with growing amazement, her wrinkled hands pressed to her chest. Oh, my dear girl, Mrs. Peterson said when Sarah finished. What a blessing. What an absolute blessing. She looked at the bag of food. There's enough here for several meals. You must share some with me. Mrs. Peterson, you've done so much for us already, Sarah protested. Nonsense, the old woman said firmly. You're going to share this food, and that's final. Besides, it's late and you're tired. Let Emma sleep here tonight. You go home and rest. I'll give her breakfast in the morning and walk her to school. Sarah wanted to argue, but she was so tired she could barely stand. Are you sure? Completely sure. Now go rest. Tomorrow is a new day. Sarah went home to her small apartment, and for the first time in months she didn't feel sad when she walked in the door. Instead, she felt grateful. She had a roof over her head. She had a daughter who loved her. And now she had hope that things could get better. The next morning, Sarah woke up and immediately called the number on Mr. Morrison's business card. A receptionist answered and scheduled an interview for Sarah the following Monday. Sarah hung up the phone and cried again, but these were happy tears. When she picked Emma up from school that afternoon, she had a surprise. She had used some of the money from the diner customers to buy a small stuffed bear from the dollar store. Emma's face lit up when she saw it. For me, Mama? Emma asked, her eyes wide. For you, baby, Sarah said, kneeling down to hug her daughter. And I have something else, too. We're having a special dinner tonight. Real chicken and chocolate cake. Emma squealed with joy. Chocolate cake? Really? Really? A very kind man helped us yesterday. His name was Marcus, and he wanted you to have a special meal. That night, Sarah and Emma sat at their small kitchen table and ate the chicken dinner together. Emma talked about her day at school between bites, and Sarah listened with her full attention. For the first time in so long, Sarah wasn't worried about money or jobs or bills. She was just present with her daughter, enjoying this moment of peace and plenty. Over the next few days, word of what had happened at Joe's Diner spread through the small town. People talked about Marcus and the road nights. They talked about the young mother who was working 2 jobs to support her daughter. They talked about how the whole diner had come together to help a stranger. On Saturday, Sarah's phone rang. It was Betty from the diner. Sarah, honey, I hope you don't mind that I'm calling, Betty said. But something wonderful has happened. After that night, Marcus and his biker group came back to talk to me and Joe, the owner. They want to start a program at the diner. What kind of program? Sarah asked. They're calling it Lily's Meals, Betty explained. It's named after Marcus's daughter. Once a week, they're going to sponsor free meals for families who are struggling. Parents can come in and get a hot meal to take home to their kids, no questions asked. Joe agreed to it immediately. We're putting up flyers around town. Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. That's beautiful. And there's more, Betty continued. The road nights asked if you'd be willing to help them organize it. They want to know the best ways to reach families who need help. They thought you might have some ideas since you've been there yourself. I'd love to help, Sarah said without hesitation. When can I start? The following Monday, Sarah went to her interview at Morrison Medical Supply. She wore her best outfit, which wasn't much, but Mr. Morrison didn't seem to care. He offered her a position as an office assistant, with hours that would allow her to be home with Emma in the evenings. The pay was almost double what she had been making at the grocery store. Sarah accepted immediately. She gave notice at both her jobs, and 2 weeks later, she started her new position. For the first time since David had left, Sarah had a normal schedule. She could have dinner with Emma every night. She could help with homework. She could read bedtime stories and tuck her daughter in. But Sarah didn't forget where she had come from. Every Saturday she went to Joe's Diner to help with Lily's Meals program. She talked to families, connected them with resources, and shared her own story to let them know they weren't alone. Marcus became a regular presence in Sarah's life, though not in a romantic way. He was more like a father figure, checking in on her and Emma, making sure they were doing okay. The Road Knights adopted Sarah and Emma as part of their extended family. They showed up for Emma's school events. They helped Sarah fix her car when it broke down. They were there, steady and reliable. One Saturday at the diner, a young woman came in looking scared and tired. She had 2 small children with her, and Sarah recognized the look in her eyes immediately. It was the same look she had seen in the mirror for so long. Sarah approached the woman gently. "Hi, I'm Sarah. Are you here for the Lily's Meals program?" The woman nodded, looking embarrassed. "Yes, I heard about it from someone at my work. I'm not usually someone who needs help, but my husband lost his job and we're behind on everything and—" Her voice trailed off. "I understand," Sarah said softly. "I was exactly where you are just a few months ago. Let me tell you a story about a man named Marcus and the night he changed my life." As Sarah told her story, the woman's expression changed from shame to hope. By the end, she was crying, but they were grateful tears. "So it does get better?" the woman asked. "It does," Sarah promised. "And you're not alone. We're going to help you just like people helped me." Sarah spent the next hour connecting the woman with resources. She told her about job training programs. She gave her information about assistance with utility bills. She even called Mr. Morrison to see if he had any positions available. Betty brought out meals for the woman's children, and she included extra food for the woman to take home. Marcus came over and talked with the woman about her situation, and by the time she left the diner, she had a plan and hope. After the woman left, Marcus sat down across from Sarah at a booth. "You're good at this," he said. "Helping people." "I learned from the best," Sarah replied, smiling at him. Marcus looked out the window at the parking lot where his motorcycle sat. "You know, Lily used to volunteer at a food bank when she was in high school. 6 months had passed since that cold November night at Joe's Diner. It was now May, and the whole town had changed in small but important ways." Sarah stood in front of a building she had driven past 100 times but never really noticed before. Today was different. Today, this building meant something special. The old community center had been closed for years, sitting empty and forgotten on the corner of Main Street and Fifth Avenue. But now it was alive again, buzzing with activity and fresh paint. A large banner hung above the entrance that read, "Lily's Hope Community Center, grand opening today." Sarah watched as Marcus and his biker friends worked on the final preparations. They were hanging streamers, setting up tables, and testing the sound system for the speeches that would happen later. The Road Knights had raised money for months to buy this building and renovate it. Now it was ready to open its doors to the community. The center would offer many services. There would be a food pantry, job training classes, after-school programs for kids, and counseling services. Everything was free or very low cost. It was Marcus's dream come true, a way to honor his daughter's memory by helping hundreds of families. Sarah's life had transformed completely since that November night. She had been working at Morrison Medical Supply for 5 months now, and Mr. Morrison had already promoted her to office manager. Her apartment was in a better neighborhood with 2 bedrooms, so Emma could finally have her own room. The refrigerator was always full. The bills were always paid on time. They even had a little money saved for emergencies. But more than the money and stability, Sarah had found purpose. She volunteered at Lily's Meals every Saturday. She had helped plan this community center. She had connected dozens of struggling families with resources and support. She had become part of something bigger than herself. Emma ran up to Sarah, her face flushed with excitement. At 7 years old now, Emma had grown taller and healthier. Her cheeks had color in them. Her eyes sparkled with joy. She wore a pretty blue dress that Sarah had bought new, not from a thrift store. "Mama, Mama," Emma called. Marcus said, "I can help cut the ribbon at the opening ceremony." "Can I, please?" Sarah smiled and knelt down to Emma's level. "Of course you can, baby. That's a big honor." "Marcus said I'm part of this story too," Emma said seriously. He said that this whole center started because of what happened to us. Is that true? Sarah thought about how to answer. It was true in a way. Marcus had been doing good deeds for years, but something about that night at the diner had sparked this bigger vision. Maybe it was because the whole community had come together. Maybe it was because he had seen that kindness was contagious. It's true, Sarah said gently. Sometimes one small moment can lead to big changes. That night at the diner was one of those moments. Emma nodded thoughtfully. I wish I could thank everyone who helped us. You will, baby. Today everyone who helped will be here. And it was true. Betty and Joe from the diner were setting up the refreshment table. Mr. Morrison was talking with the mayor about bringing more businesses into the center. The elderly couple from that night were sitting on a bench holding hands and smiling. The young family was there too, their children playing on the new playground equipment that Marcus and his friends had installed last week. Mrs. Peterson walked up to Sarah, moving slowly with her cane. She wore her best dress and had styled her gray hair specially for the occasion. "Oh, Sarah dear," Mrs. Peterson said, her voice full of emotion. "Look at what's been created. All from one act of kindness." "More than one," Sarah corrected gently. "It took everyone. You included, Mrs. Peterson. You've been helping me since before that night. You're part of this story, too." The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "I'm just so proud of you, dear. Look how far you've come." Sarah hugged her, this woman who had been like a grandmother to Emma. "I couldn't have done it without you." Marcus walked over to them, wiping sweat from his forehead. He had been working since dawn to get everything ready. His leather jacket was hung on a chair nearby, and he wore a simple black t-shirt that showed his Road Knights tattoo. "Sarah," he said, "I need to talk to you about something before the ceremony starts." They walked to a quieter corner of the building. Inside, Sarah could see the rooms that had been set up for different purposes. There was a computer lab for job seekers, a playroom for children, a kitchen that would serve hot meals, a library with donated books. It was more than she ever could have imagined. "What is it?" Sarah asked. Marcus looked uncomfortable, which was unusual for him. "The center is going to need a director, someone to run the day-to-day operations, coordinate the volunteers, manage the programs. I was hoping you might be interested in the job." Sarah's eyes went wide. "Me? Marcus, I don't have experience running something like this." "You have the most important experience," Marcus said firmly. "You've been where our clients are. You know what they need. You know how to talk to them without making them feel ashamed. You've been organizing Lily's meals for months now, and it runs perfectly. Plus, the pay would be better than what you're making now. And the center has a daycare. Emma could be here with you after school." Sarah felt overwhelmed. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it," Marcus suggested. "Take your time. The position won't be available for another month anyway. We need to finish getting everything set up first." "I'll think about it," Sarah promised. But in her heart, she already knew her answer would be yes. This was what she was meant to do. This was how she could pay forward all the kindness she had received. The ceremony started at noon. Hundreds of people from the community filled the parking lot and spilled onto the street. The mayor gave a speech about the importance of helping neighbors. Mr. Morrison talked about how businesses had a responsibility to support their communities. Betty told the story of that night at the diner, making everyone laugh and cry. Then it was Marcus's turn to speak. He walked to the microphone slowly, and Sarah could see that he was nervous. Marcus wasn't comfortable with attention or praise. He was more comfortable working quietly in the background. 12 years ago, Marcus began, his deep voice carrying across the crowd. "I lost my daughter Lily in a car accident. She was 11 years old. For a long time after that, I was angry. I was lost. I didn't know how to live in a world without her." The crowd was completely silent, listening. But slowly I realized something. Marcus continued. "Lily had always wanted to help people. Even as a kid, she was always the first one to share her lunch with someone who forgot theirs. She volunteered at food banks. She collected coats for homeless people in the winter. She had a heart bigger than her small body." Marcus paused, his voice thick with emotion. "I decided that if I couldn't have my daughter, I could at least honor her memory by living the way she would have wanted. By helping people. By being kind. By making a difference." He looked directly at Sarah and Emma in the front row. 6 months ago, I met a young mother in a diner. She was working 2 jobs and barely surviving. She asked if she could take her leftovers home for her daughter. That moment reminded me why I do this work. That moment reminded me of every time Lily asked to give her allowance to someone in need. Sarah felt tears running down her cheeks. Emma held her hand tightly. "This center isn't just mine," Marcus said. "It belongs to every person who has ever helped someone else. It belongs to the woman who works 3 jobs to feed her kids. It belongs to the neighbor who babysits for free. It belongs to the business owner who gives someone a chance. It belongs to all of us." He gestured to the building behind him. "Lily's Hope Community Center will be a place where people can come without shame, where families can get help without judgment, where children can play and learn and be safe, where anyone who is struggling can find support and kindness." Marcus stepped back from the microphone and called Emma forward. "Emma Martinez, will you help me cut this ribbon?" Emma looked at Sarah, who nodded with encouragement. The little girl walked up to Marcus, who handed her one side of a large pair of scissors. They posed for pictures as the crowd applauded. "On the count of 3, Marcus said. 1, 2, 3. Together, Marcus and Emma cut the ribbon. The crowd erupted in cheers. Balloons were released into the sky. Music started playing. People rushed forward to tour the new center. Sarah watched it all with a full heart. She thought about that cold November night when she had walked into Joe's diner feeling hopeless and alone. She had been invisible then, just another struggling person in a world that moved too fast to notice. But Marcus had noticed, and his noticing had changed everything. Betty came up beside Sarah and put an arm around her shoulders. "Can you believe all this came from one dinner?" "I can believe it," Sarah said, "because I lived it. I saw how one act of kindness created another, and another, and another. It's like dropping a stone in water and watching the ripples spread." "You're one of those ripples now," Betty said. "Look at all the families you've helped through Lily's meals. Look at all the people who have come to you for advice and support. You're spreading those ripples even further." Sarah watched as Marcus gave tours of the center to small groups. He showed them the food pantry, the job training center, the children's areas. His face was peaceful in a way Sarah had never seen before.